and welcome to my channel, The Orchid Hut. My name is Dana, and today's video is going to be a repotting of a Latoria type Dendrobium by the name of Maiden Charlotte. Now it is a primary hybrid. It's a cross between Rotostictum and Aberrans. And this orchid has been featured in videos previously about Latoria type Dendrobiums, so I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner of the screen for that one. And it was also featured, unfortunately, in a spider mite video that I did a few weeks ago. And sadly, you know, some of the leaves were affected by that, but I do think the spider mites have been eradicated now. So I'll also put a link up in the right hand corner of the screen if you would like to go back and watch that video. It is helpful to recognize when something is attacking your orchid because you don't want it to spread to your entire collection. Okay, so I've had this orchid probably since the fall of last year, so maybe now 4 months. And it spent the last part of the fall outside, and then it was a little while in the garage while I was trying to maintain some of my outdoor orchids in the garage when the temperatures weren't getting too cold in the nighttime. But now what I'm going to be trying to do this year is I'm going to be putting all of my Latoria type Dendrobiums in the bay window for the growing season and see how they do. There are some other higher light orchids that I think would benefit from being outside. So I'm going to be switching things up a little bit for this year's growing season, putting some of the higher light orchids outside and putting plants like this that can be grown indoors in my bay window. So I'm going to be repotting this one with that in mind. And I'm noticing that the media that this orchid is in currently is pretty chunky. It's got a lot of large bark. It seems to have some large pieces of sponge rock, and that's about all I can see on the surface. So as I was preparing to repot this orchid today, I decided to do something a little bit different with my potting media. Now, in the past, in previous videos, you will have heard me say that I typically just use pre-made mixes and I don't really change it up. Well, this is one of the cases where I will be changing it up, so let me explain why. This right here is my typical Dendrobium pre-made mix, and it has sort of medium pieces of bark, some smaller pieces of sponge rock, which are borderline more like perlite because they're so tiny. And then it has a little bit of, clay rock in here. But this media is going to be a lot more water retentive than what the orchid is currently in. So in order to help it transition just a little bit, I'm going to be mixing into my usual Dendrobium mix some of my Cattleya mix because this is chunkier. It has those larger pieces of sponge rock that this orchid has been acclimated to. It has some other pieces of rock, and the bark chips are a bit larger. So I'm going to be mixing these two. Now, the next time I repot this orchid, I will probably just go with the straight Dendrobium mix because it will have been in this for a couple of years, and then I can just switch it over to my regular Dendrobium pre-made mix. And you know, as I'm doing this repotting, I am writing a note for this orchid that this is what I've done, so that the next time I repot it, I will remember why the media looks like it does, and I will remember to just use a pre-made mix made for Dendrobiums the next time. Okay, so I'm hoping that this pot will be the right size. If it turns out that this is not a good fit, then I'll have to break the video and go hunt for another pot. So let me move this down a little bit. I'm not expecting really to have to cut anything at the top of the orchid, although I do have my pruning scissors already flamed and ready to go. So let's put the tag aside and dump this out and see what's in here. There is, just to point this out, there is new growth starting on this orchid right here. So I'm expecting more new growth and more new roots shortly. Okay, pretty good root system here. Now, so far, what is inside the pot is consistent with what I was seeing on the top. Really good root system here. Although, I'm oftentimes not a fan of the larger bark pieces because the roots, for whatever reason, tend to want to embed themselves in those larger bark pieces. And when an orchid has been in a pot for as long as this one probably has, it's difficult to get some of the old bark away without ruining the roots. And here's case in point right here. There's a root. Now, you know, if I sacrifice this one, it's not the end of the world, but it has actually grown through a piece of the bark. And if I want to remove that bark, I will completely destroy that root. So I'm just going to, for right now, very, very gently pull away what's not resisting me. And while I'm working on this tedious task, I'll give you an update on the Texas weather. So, we continue to be a roller coaster. Today it's raining, and we're actually under a flash flood watch, expecting anywhere between 4 and 6 inches later this afternoon, which can cause localized street flooding, etc., etc. So I hope it's not quite that bad, but the weather forecast does predict that. Temperatures are in the low 60 degrees Fahrenheit, so maybe like about 62, 63 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's not warm, but it's not particularly cool either. Humidity super high because it's raining. However, day after tomorrow, we will be dropping to below freezing temperatures for at least a couple of days. And then I think they're saying that the wind chill is going to be in the low 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And when that cold system moves through, it clashes with the warm air or the warmer air that we have here. And then there's, you know, potential for hailstorms and high wind. And then they're even saying that there's a chance for icy conditions, like about, I think, like Thursday or Friday of this week. So, you know, orchids are in. They were out over the weekend getting some fresh air and some sun. And I did let my Vandas in the wooden slat baskets be out in the rain this morning. They do like the rainwater. And I had my bulbul phylums outside in the wooden slat baskets. They also enjoyed the rain. But now they're back in so that they can dry by nightfall. And then they will need to be inside, stay inside for the duration of this really cold weather that's coming. Okay, so I think I'm to a place where running some water through this will be helpful to see if I can work out some of these other larger pieces. So I'm going to be taking this to the sink, and I'll be back shortly, and we'll see how much more of this was able to be washed out. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, so back from the sink. Inside the root system there was far more of this sponge rock than there was bark. So I really am glad that I decided to mix in some of the Cattleya mix for the new repotting, because this orchid has had predominantly a sponge rock mix that it's been growing in. Okay, so let me get the old out of the way. And just for comparison, this was the old pot and this is the new pot. So they are very similar in size, although the new one will be round. So I am not thinking that I need a larger pot, but we will try in just a second. Okay, so now that the roots have been washed, the root system is in excellent shape here. And this is one of those kinds of orchids where there's so many roots and the root system is so fine that it's really not worth the time of trying to go root by root and trim off what might be a little string of a root. It's just not worth the time to try to do that. So the next best technique to use is to trim off the root system on the old side of the plant if necessary. So it's pretty clear how that works here. This is the older part of the plant where all of the smallest pseudobulbs are. This was the pseudobulb when it was just a seedling, and this one, and this one, and this one. And then it started growing some larger canes with larger bulbs and taller canes with larger bulbs, until it gets to this side of the plant where it's the tallest and the largest growth. And you can see even now that the new growth is happening right here. There's another little new root growth right here above my finger. And when I was washing it, I even noticed a few places where there is some new root development. So right here, there's another little new growth as well as some new root buds happening. So this side of the plant is what will be in active growth, and this is the newest root system on this side of the plant. So if we're going to remove anything at all as we're repotting this, it's going to be these older pseudobulbs right here. And so they can just be twisted off. And if old roots come with them, that's fine, because those are the roots that would probably be dead or almost dead. And I think I will be taking off at least this one more. But even the root system here is not bad. I see a few places where there's like a little bit of dead bulbs. But even this is not super bad here, and it gives the appearance that it would still be able to support the plant. So I'm really not going to be trimming that, although taking off those seedling bulbs is helpful because when I repot it, they will not fall below the media and cause the plant to have any kind of rot because of being potted too deep. Okay, so I'm really not going to mess with that anymore. All right, so let's have a look at this new pot. Now, new growth is happening here, so if I can give this orchid a little bit of extra room on this side of the pot, that would be perfectly okay. However, I am thinking that I might want to upsize the pot just a little bit so that I don't have to repot this at least for 2 years. So let me go see what else I might have available, and I'll be right back. Okay, back with a slightly larger pot here. If I had trimmed more of the root system off of this orchid, the smaller pot would have probably worked, but because the root system was unexpectedly in such good shape, that wasn't necessary. So this pot has been used before. That's okay. It's been washed with hot soap and water, and it's okay to use your pots as long as reuse your pots as long as they're clean. There is some cork in the bottom. And this is the two medias mixed together, the Dendrobium mix and the Cattleya mix, which is slightly chunkier. Okay, so I'm going to put some of that in the bottom. And then remember, the older part of the plant is here. So I'm going to put this one just slightly offset, not by much. I have a thing about orchids being way over to one side in pots. I think that looks odd. So I do it a little bit, but not so that it's so noticeable. We want to give room for growth on the active side of the plant. And because I got a larger pot and did not get more media, I can already tell that I'm probably going to run short here. And we will be checking for air spaces in just a second. Okay. Bit of an air space right there. Let me poke that down. Okay, that helped. A little bit of an air space right here. Let's see. Hopefully some of these smaller pieces will fall down in that air space. Let's see. Still a bit of an air space right here. Okay, that's a bit better. Okay. So let me take another little short break and I will be back to finish topping off the pot. Okay, so a little bit more of the two mixes in this little cup here. And all we need to do is finish topping off the pot and making sure that the orchid is planted at the correct height. And just double checking one more time that there's not any obvious large air gaps. Okay. All right. Okay, it looks good. I'm seeing that the new growth still is above the bark, which is good. So there's a little new growth right here and right there, and then the new roots were down along the bottom of the canes on this side. And I think I will just need to water this in really well. And the repot is finished. So always remember to put the tag back. Latoria type Dendrobium Maiden Charlotte. Okay, so if you like this video or learned something new, please give it a thumbs up, and the subscribe button will be coming up in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and talk to you next time.